Welcome, dear listeners, to this cozy tale of mystery and intrigue, brought to you in the timeless style of Agatha Christie. I'm delighted to present Murder Among the Roses, a deadly secret in St. Mary Mead, a Miss Marple-inspired story set in the quaint English village of St. Mary Mead during the gentle haze of the 1950s. Join our sharp-witted elderly detective as she unravels a web of secrets amid blooming gardens and afternoon teas. Settle in with a cuppa and let the story unfold. Our adventure begins now. Chapter 1. The Bloom of Suspicion. In the sleepy village of St. Mary Mead, where the thatched cottages nestled like contented hens under the summer sun, life moved at a rhythm dictated by the seasons and the occasional gossip over garden fences. It was the height of rose season, and the annual rose show at Meadow Manor was the highlight of the year, a celebration of velvety petals and thorny rivalries. Miss Eleanor Finch, the village's beloved spinster and amateur sleuth, sat in her cozy parlor, her knitting needles clicking softly as she observed the world through lace-curtained windows. Miss Finch was a woman of advanced years, with silver hair neatly pinned and eyes that missed nothing. She had a knack for spotting the irregularities in human nature, much like one might notice a wilted bloom in an otherwise perfect garden. On this particular afternoon, the air buzzed with excitement about the Rose Show, hosted at the grand rose gardens of Meadow Manor, the estate of the late Sir Reginald Hargrove's widow, Lady Amelia Hargrove. But tranquility shattered when a scream pierced the village calm. It came from the direction of Meadow Manor. Miss Finch set down her knitting and hurried out, her sensible shoes crunching on the gravel path. She arrived to find a crowd gathered around the prize rosebed, where Mr. Harold Beaumont, the village's champion rose grower and judge of the show, lay lifeless among his beloved crimson glory roses. His face was pale, his hands clutched at his throat, and a faint scent of bitter almonds hung in the air, suggesting poison, though no one dared say it aloud. "Oh, mercy me," gasped Mrs. Vicar, the vicar's plump wife, fanning herself with a program. "Poor Mr. Beaumont, he was judging the entries just moments ago." Inspector Craddock from the county police arrived shortly, a sturdy man with a mustache that twitched like a suspicious cat's tail. "Looks like natural causes. Perhaps a heart attack," he muttered. But Miss Finch noticed the overturned teacup nearby, its contents spilled into the soil, and the faint scratches on Beaumont's hands as if from thorns. As the villagers murmured, Miss Finch's mind whirred. Beaumont had been a pillar of the community, but pillars often cast long shadows. Who might have wanted him gone? There was young Neville Hargrove, Lady Amelia's estranged nephew, who stood to inherit Meadow Manor, but had quarreled with Beaumont over land rights for expanding the rose gardens. Then there was Miss Lydia Thorne, the ambitious gardener and Beaumont's rival, whose hybrid roses had been snubbed in last year's show. Dr. Elias Hawthorne, the local physician, had been seen arguing with Beaumont about unpaid medical bills. And Mrs. Vicar herself, Beatrice Crowley, had a motive. Beaumont had exposed her secret affair with the postman years ago, though she'd laughed it off. Finally, Elsie, the maid at Meadow Manor, a quiet girl with a grudge after Beaumont accused her of stealing fertilizer. Miss Finch sipped tea later that evening with her neighbor, Dolly Bantry. "It's peculiar, Dolly," she said softly. "Mr. Beaumont was hale as an oak this morning, and that teacup, rose-hip tea, his favorite. Who poured it?" Dolly leaned in. "Gossip says Neville was furious about the inheritance, but Lydia's been experimenting with poisonous plants for her garden pests." Miss Finch nodded, her eyes twinkling. "People are like roses, dear. Beautiful, but full of hidden thorns." Chapter 2. Thorns in the Garden. The following day dawned with a soft mist over St. Mary Mead, veiling the rose gardens of Meadow Manor in ethereal beauty. Miss Finch strolled the paths, her basket ostensibly for clippings, but her eyes scanning for clues. The gardens were a riot of color, scarlet climbers twining over arches, delicate tea roses nodding in the breeze, but an undercurrent of unease lingered. She encountered Neville Hargrove first, a handsome young man in his 30s, pruning bushes with vigor that bordered on aggression. "Dreadful business about Uncle Beaumont," he said, snipping a dead head. "He wasn't my uncle, really, just a family friend who advised Aunt Amelia. But he blocked my plans to sell part of the estate for development." Miss Finch tilted her head. "Development? In our quiet village? How modern." Neville flushed. "Times change, Miss Finch. Not all of us can live on nostalgia." Next, she found Miss Lydia Thorne kneeling by her prize plot, her gloves soiled with earth. Lydia was a sharp-featured woman of 40, with a passion for botany that rivaled Beaumont's. "He called my roses vulgar hybrids," she exclaimed when Miss Finch inquired, "after all my work with natural pesticides. But I wouldn't harm a fly, let alone a man." "Natural pesticides?" Miss Finch echoed innocently. "Like cyanide derivatives from apricot pits. So clever." Lydia paled slightly but recovered. "Purely for aphids, Miss Finch." At the manor house, Elsie the maid served tea with trembling hands. "Mr. Beaumont was kind to me once," she whispered, "but he sacked my brother from the gardens last year, accusing him of theft. We needed that job." Dr. Hawthorne arrived for a house call on Lady Amelia, his medical bag in hand. "Beaumont owed me for treatments," he admitted gruffly. "Heart issues, you know, but poison? Preposterous." And Mrs. Crowley, bustling about with floral arrangements, confided over scones. He knew too much about everyone. But forgiveness is a Christian virtue, isn't it? Miss Finch noticed a red herring in the form of a misplaced gardening glove near the crime scene, embroidered with Neville's initials, but it was too obvious, she thought. And why had Beaumont's teacup been laced with rose thorns scratched inside, as if to mimic a prick? That evening, as villagers gathered at the pub, whispers flew. Miss Finch sipped her sherry, piecing together the everyday observations. Beaumont's scratched hands, the bitter almond scent, the rivals' alibis that seemed too perfect. Chapter 3. Petals of Deception. Midweek brought rain to St. Mary Mead, turning the paths of Meadow Manor into muddy trails that revealed footprints and secrets. Miss Finch, undeterred by the drizzle, visited Lady Amelia in her drawing room, where vases overflowed with roses. "Poor Harold," Lady Amelia sighed, an elegant widow in her 60s. "He was like a brother, but he'd discovered something, a deadly secret about the village." Miss Finch's ears pricked. The central mystery deepened. Beaumont had uncovered a hidden affair involving Mrs. Crowley and Dr. Hawthorne, not the postman as rumored. Red herring or clue? And there was talk of smuggled rare rose seeds during the war, involving Neville's father. Inspector Craddock interviewed suspects at the village hall. Neville claimed he'd been in London, but a train ticket stub found in the garden suggested otherwise. Lydia's alibi was gardening alone. Unverifiable. Dr. Hawthorne said he'd been at a patient's, but the patient was elderly and forgetful. Mrs. Crowley was at choir practice, yet someone saw her near the manor. Elsie had been in the kitchen, brewing tea. Miss Finch observed a clever clue. Beaumont's notebook, hidden in a rose bush, with entries on poisonous blends and initials, LT, NH, EM, BC, EH, but a page was torn out. Misdirection abounded. A villager swore they saw a shadowy figure with a vial, pointing to Lydia's pesticides, yet Miss Finch noted the doctor's access to cyanide for medical use. Over knitting with Dolly, Miss Finch mused, "It's like a tangled vine, dear. Pull one thread and another knots." Dolly gasped. "You think it's poison in the tea? But who?" Someone who knows roses and people, Miss Finch replied enigmatically. Chapter 4. The Root of Evil. As the rose show approached, tension bloomed like an overripe flower. Miss Finch delved deeper, visiting the suspects' homes. At Lydia's cottage, she found books on toxic plants, including rosehip infusions laced with cyanide from cherry leaves, a natural method. Neville's rooms at the manor revealed letters demanding money from Beaumont, who had loaned him funds. Dr. Hawthorne's surgery held vials of potassium cyanide for photography hobbies. Mrs. Crowley's vicarage had a garden of suspicious herbs. Elsie's quarters hid a locket with Beaumont's photo, suggesting unrequited love. A red herring emerged, a poisoned thorn found in Beaumont's pocket, implicating the gardener. But Miss Finch saw. Through it, the scratches were post-mortem, staged. Inspector Craddock arrested Neville, citing the glove and footprints. "Open and shut," he declared, but Miss Finch shook her head. "Too tidy, Inspector, like a pruned bush hiding weeds." She gathered clues. The teacup's thorns inside, not out. The almond scent from cyanide. Beaumont's notebook mentioning betrayal in the blend. That night, alone in her parlor, Miss Finch connected the dots. The murderer had used a custom method, poisoned rosehip tea infused with cyanide disguised as a natural fertilizer additive, poured during the show. But who? Chapter 5. The Final Bloom. The rose show dawned bright, villagers assembling at Meadow Manor despite the shadow of death. Miss Finch requested a gathering in the drawing room, Lady Amelia, the suspects, and Inspector Craddock. "Dear friends," she began gently, "Mr. Beaumont's death was no accident. It was murder by poisoned rose-hip tea, laced with cyanide to mimic a natural toxin from the garden." Gasps echoed. "The clues were in everyday things," she continued. "The scratched hands, staged with thorns after death. The notebook's torn page, hidden by the killer. But the key was the teacup, thorns inside, as if Beaumont had pricked himself while drinking, but impossible unless added." She turned to Elsie. "You brewed the tea, dear, but innocently. The poison was in the rosehips themselves, treated with cyanide fertilizer." Eyes widened. "But who?" Craddock demanded. Miss Finch smiled sadly. "Dr. Hawthorne, you had access to cyanide, motive from debts, and knowledge of poisons. But the deadly secret Beaumont uncovered. Your affair with Mrs. Crowley, which he threatened to expose. You mixed the poison into Beaumont's special rose-hip blend the night before, knowing he'd drink it alone while judging." Hawthorne blustered, but crumbled under evidence. A vial in his bag matched the residue. Red herrings cleared, Neville's glove planted, Lydia's books irrelevant, Elsie's locket a gift from Beaumont's kindness. As Hawthorne was led away, the village sighed in relief. Miss Finch patted Mrs. Crowley's hand. "Secrets wilt in sunlight, dear." The show proceeded, roses blooming triumphantly. Miss Finch returned home, content in the cozy rhythm of St. Mary Mead. And so ends our tale, dear listeners. Thank you for joining this gentle journey through mystery and village charm. Until next time, may your gardens flourish and your secrets stay buried. Good night.